For nearly 30 years, the fictional county of Midsomer has quietly held the record for the highest murder rate in England, and somehow nobody in the villages ever seems to notice. Since it premiered on ITV in March 1997, based on the Chief Inspector Barnaby novels by Caroline Graham and developed with the involvement of Anthony Horowitz, Midsomer Murders has sent two generations of detectives wandering through thatched cottages, cricket pitches, and flower shows, always arriving just in time to find another body tucked behind the vicarage or floating in the duck pond. The show has since stretched past 25 series and more than 140 episodes, produced throughout by Bentley Productions, making it one of the longest-running and most widely exported detective dramas Britain has ever made, sold to more than 200 territories around the world under titles, including Inspector Barnaby. But while the killings on screen have stayed reliably gruesome and the body count has climbed into the hundreds, the people who solved them have lived lives every bit as dramatic once the cameras stopped rolling. Some walked away from the show at the peak of their fame. Some turned a small supporting role into an Oscar-winning career, and a couple of much-loved faces are sadly no longer with us. Here is where the real Midsomer Murders cast has ended up in 2026. John Nettles was already in his early 50s, a household name from 11 years playing Bergerac, when he put on Tom Barnaby's raincoat for the first time in 1997. Nobody could have guessed that a detective built around gentle patience, rather than car chases, would run for 14 years and more than 80 episodes, turning Nettles into arguably the most recognizable amateur pathologist's best friend on British television. When he decided to retire the character in 2011, he did it on his own terms, telling colleagues that 14 years was simply enough and that it was time to let someone else carry the badge. His personal life had its own long chapter before that. Nettles was married to Joyce Middleton from 1966 until 1979, and the couple had a daughter, Emma, who now lives in Jersey with children of her own. He later married the painter Catherine Seeley in 1995, and by 2026 the two of them have been together for more than 3 decades, sharing a 15th-century longhouse in Devon along with a small menagerie of rescue dogs, rescue horses, and donkeys. Now in his 80s, Nettles has largely swapped acting for writing and local history, and he's become an outspoken campaigner against large-scale development near his home, at one point leading a very public fight against plans for one of the country's biggest solar farms on nearby land. He received an OB for services to drama not long before he left the series, telling reporters at the time that he did not feel he deserved it as much as real-life heroes like firefighters, and long before either Bergerac or Barnaby, he had already built a career on stage and in shows like A Family at War and Robin of Sherwood. He also revealed that he believed the Queen herself had been a fan of DCI Barnaby, a detail he clearly found rather moving. Nettles has continued to lend his voice to documentary narration in the years since retiring from acting, and he remains close to his daughter Emma, whom he has described as one of his best friends alongside his wife Catherine. He also holds the title of president of the Southwest Academy of Fine and Applied Arts, reflecting the deep roots he and Catherine, herself a painter, have put down in the Devon countryside. These days, the man who solved more than 250 fictional murders spends his time worrying about hedgerows and rescue animals instead of homicides. Dr. George Bullard, the pathologist whose blunt one-liners over a corpse became one of Midsomer's signature pleasures, was played by Barry Jackson from the very first episode. Jackson was already 59 and a veteran of British stage and screen when the role landed in his lap, and he stuck with it for 14 series, becoming one of the steadiest presences in Barnaby's world even as sergeants and constables rotated in and out around him. Before Midsomer, Jackson had spent decades quietly working through some of British television's most memorable productions, including a turn as the Time Lord Drax in Doctor Who opposite Tom Baker, a role in Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon, and an appearance in the landmark drama Kathy Come Home. He left the series in 2011, around the same time as John Nettles, as the punishing demands of a long-running production became harder to sustain. Sadly, his retirement was short. Barry Jackson died at his home in North London on the 5th of December, 2013, at the age of 75, after a battle with cancer, surrounded by his family. He was survived by his wife, Denise, and 6 children. Colleagues remembered him as a quietly brilliant character actor whose face turned up everywhere in British television for more than 50 years, even when audiences could not always place his name. Jackson had once described his own approach to the show with real affection, calling it pantomime crime rather than true crime, and noting that it was always satisfying when a script gave Bullard more to say than simply announcing a time of death. That mixture of dry professionalism and warmth is exactly what generations of viewers remember him for, and interestingly, his early unavailability due to a touring stage commitment was the very reason producers briefly introduced the alternate researcher character Dan Peterson, a small role that ended up going to a then little-known actor named Toby Jones. Taking over as the new lead detective in 2011 was never going to be simple, and Neil Dudgeon knew it. Stepping into the role of DCI John Barnaby, Tom's cousin, meant following 14 years of John Nettles and hoping that loyal viewers would accept a different face behind the same surname. Dudgeon was 50 when he took the job, though Midsomer was not entirely new territory for him. He had actually appeared in the show years earlier, in a 2000 episode, playing an entirely different character before ever becoming a Barnaby. He has spoken candidly about the pressure of those early years, worrying whether ratings would hold and whether fans would ever warm to him the way they had to Nettles. They did gradually, and by 2026, at 65, Dudgeon has now been the face of Midsomer for longer than his predecessor. Even if he has appeared in fewer total episodes, away from set, he lives a fairly private life in West London with his wife Mary Pete, a BBC radio producer he met through a play, and their 2 children. Before Midsomer became his defining role, Dudgeon had built a solid career across British television, including Life of Riley and appearances in productions like Bridget Jones, The Edge of Reason, giving him plenty of experience long before he had to prove that there really could be another Barnaby. As of 2025, his tenure in the role has technically outlasted John Nettles' original run, even though he has appeared in fewer total episodes, a distinction that speaks to just how differently the show has been produced and paced in its second era. Notably, the character he plays is still called DCI John Barnaby rather than simply the new Barnaby, a naming choice widely understood to help preserve overseas sales and territories where the show is marketed as Inspector Barnaby regardless of which cousin is on the case. Jane Wymark played Joyce Barnaby, Tom's endlessly patient wife, for the entire 14-season run opposite John Nettles, and she was 44 when the series began in 1997. As the daughter of the celebrated actor Patrick Wymark, she grew up around the industry, but Joyce gave her a screen identity entirely her own. She and Nettles became genuinely close friends off camera, by her own account, joking that 14 years of playing husband and wife on screen would have been unbearable if they had not got on so well in real life. When Nettles decided the time had come to leave, Wymark left alongside him, later explaining that as fond as she was of Joyce, the character had become limiting and she wanted the freedom to do other things, particularly a return to the theater work she had always loved. Long before Joyce Barnaby, Wymark had already made her name playing Morwenna in the original 1970s adaptation of Poldark. Wymark is also the great-granddaughter of the novelist W. W. Jacobs, and she has spoken about drawing inspiration for Joyce from an aunt of her own, a warm, endlessly capable woman with a large family who became her private model for the role. Now in her 70s, she has continued to work in television and theater in the years since leaving Midsomer, including a role in the 2013 miniseries Joe and an appearance in a National Theatre live production of Medea, while largely staying out of the spotlight that so often follows long-running British soap and drama stars. She has been married to Paul Howson since the 1990s, and the couple have 2 sons together. Daniel Casey was only 25 when he became Tom Barnaby's first sergeant, the eager and occasionally overconfident D.S. Gavin Troy. In 1997, Troy quickly became one of the show's most popular characters, which made Casey's decision to leave in 2003, at the height of the show's popularity, all the more surprising. He has said the choice came from a fear of being permanently typecast in one kind of role, and by his own account the years that followed brought real uncertainty as he looked for the next opportunity. That uncertainty eventually paid off in a long and varied career across some of British soap opera's biggest names, including Coronation Street, EastEnders, and Emmerdale, as well as film roles in The Last King of Scotland and The Damned United. Casey married Ellie in 2005, and the couple have two sons, Rafferty and Milo. He has stayed close to Midsomer in an unexpected way too, returning in later years to play Tom Barnaby himself in a stage adaptation of the original novels, a neat bit of full-circle casting for the actor who once played Barnaby's sidekick. Casey, the son of the journalist and television presenter Luke Casey, studied English literature at Durham University before training as an actor, and he has kept close ties to the Midsomer world ever since, occasionally reflecting fondly in interviews on his early scenes with John Nettles and how naturally the two of them worked together from their very first day filming. Now in his 50s, Casey lives a relatively low-profile life with his wife Ellie and their two sons, while continuing to work steadily in television and theater, including recent stage productions such as Abigail's Party and, yes, Prime Minister. D.S. Daniel Scott arrived in Midsomer as a cocky transplant from the Metropolitan Police, and his sudden disappearance from the series became one of its stranger loose threads, explained away with nothing more than a passing mention that he had called in sick. John Hopkins, who played Scott for 2 seasons from 2004, has since explained that there was no drama behind the exit at all. He simply felt the demands of a long-running television series were pulling him away from the stage work and Royal Shakespeare Company career he had built before Midsomer and wanted to return to. That choice led him back to a substantial theater career, alongside film and television roles that have taken him far beyond rural England, including Alice in Wonderland, the BBC's Poldark reboot as Sir Francis Bassett, and more recently a turn as Jeffrey Epstein in the drama A Very Royal Scandal, plus a role in the War Drama Masters of the Air. Hopkins has also moved into voice work for major video games, including Hitman. Now in his 50s, he continues to split his time between stage and screen, following the very path his abrupt departure from Midsomer helped set him on. After Daniel Casey's D.S. Troy departed in 2003, it was John Hawkins's D.S. Dan Scott who briefly filled the sergeant's chair before Jason Hughes arrived in 2005 as D.S. Ben Jones, a role that would end up being the longest-serving of any of Tom and John Barnaby's junior partners, until Nick Hendricks eventually overtook it. Hughes, a Welsh actor from Porthcawl who trained at Lambda and had already broken television ground playing a gay lawyer in the 1990s BBC drama This Life, was in his early 30s when he joined Midsomer, and he ultimately stayed for 8 years, working opposite both John Nettles and Neil Dudgeon before deciding to leave in 2013. Hughes has spoken openly about the toll of the show's relentless filming schedule, describing a real sense of burnout after years of commuting back and forth from location shoots. And he has said the decision to step away was about protecting his health and his ability to be present for his family, rather than any falling out with the production. He briefly explored opportunities in Los Angeles after leaving before choosing to return to the United Kingdom, and he went on to build a strong body of work in other dramas, most notably playing the morally compromised millionaire Vince Whitman in the ITV thriller Marcella. He returned to Midsomer for one guest appearance in 2017, a nod to how fondly he still regarded his time on the show. Hughes married the actress and designer Natasha Dahlberg in 2005, and the couple have 3 children together. Now in his mid-50s, he continues to work steadily in British television while keeping a much lower-key pace than the one that once wore him down, splitting his energy between acting, writing, and time with his family. Cully Barnaby, Tom and Joyce's independent-minded daughter, grew up on screen alongside the actress who played her. Laura Howard was only 19 when she took the role in 1997, meaning she spent much of her late teens and 20s balancing acting with ordinary young adulthood in a way her character rarely had to. She stayed with the show for the full 14 years, leaving in 2011 alongside Nettles and Wymark. After so long attached to one supporting character, Howard has said it took real effort afterward to be seen for different kinds of roles, and much of her post-Midsomer work has been in British theatre, where she has appeared with companies, including the Royal Shakespeare Company and the Donmar Warehouse. She has also continued to work on British television, with credits including Casualty. Now in her late 40s, Howard keeps a largely private life, while still occasionally turning up at events connected to the show's loyal fanbase, proof that the character who defined her 20s never entirely closed the door on other work. Sarah Barnaby, the local headteacher married to DCI John Barnaby, gave Midsomer a very different kind of family life than Tom and Joyce's, since she was never a police officer herself. Fiona Dolman was 41 when she joined the cast in 2011, becoming a steady presence throughout the Neil Dudgeon era. Before Midsomer, Dolman had already built a long television career, including a well-remembered role as Jackie Bradley in the long-running series Heartbeat, along with credits in The Bill, Holby City, Coronation Street, and Casualty. Within the show itself, Sarah's storylines have included the birth of a daughter, Betty, giving Dolman one of the more grounded family arcs on a series otherwise obsessed with death. Dolman has also continued to take on roles outside Midsomer, even while remaining a series regular, including an appearance in the acclaimed drama Unforgotten. Now in her 50s, she remains part of the current Midsomer cast, continuing to balance one of British television's lunges.